Shavua Tov. We'll try to continue our picture of the Beis Hamikdash. So far, we covered the Harabayis, and now we're moving closer in, zooming in on the Beis Hamikdash itself. And the way he presents it here, he starts with the Soreg, then he goes on to the Chel, from there to the Shar LeEzras Nashim, then to the Ezras Nashim itself, and then to an area which is called the Guztara, and then to the Menoros, the Lishkas HaNazirim, Lishkas HaEtzim. I mean, it's very, very complicated. The Migdash is actually, comprises about, in this presentation, 92 areas. 92. Okay. So we're at the very beginning, and we're talking about the Soreg. Now, we said that the Harabayis is 500 amas square, and now we discussed the distance between the Harabayis and the Kosel, or the Koslei Beis Hamikdash. And that was a pretty significant area. But now we're talking about a mechitza, the outside of the Koslei Beis Hamikdash, and the distance between this mechitza and the Koslei Beis Hamikdash is 10 amos, and that area called 10 amos between the mechitza and the Koslei Beis Hamikdash is called the Soreg. And again, all this is codified in the Mishnayos in Masechta Talmud. I'm sorry, Masechta Midos, I meant to say, I said Talmud. Okay. Now, the Soreg is a perforated mechitza sheyesh bo nekavim, and it's made of small pieces of wood, meaning they're very thin, and they go shesi v'orev ba'alakson, right? So you have like a warp and a woof, it goes in both directions. They are kind of weaved together, these eitzim dakim, and they're very long. I mean, they're very thin, but very long. Anyway, so between the wall, if you look carefully between these trees, these wood, you'll find nekavim. There are holes in them. And the word soreg comes from the word misureges, which means that when you weave together shesi ve'orev in, let's say, rope, or in this case in wood, that's called a misureges. It seems that back in the day, what they used to do is they had a bed, and underneath the bed, they would put this kind of matting that was made of either rope or perhaps wood, strips of wood. Anyway, the soreg itself, which is this mechitza, is 10 tvachim high. So again, the 10 amas between the soreg and the koslei Beis Hamikdash, and the soreg itself is 10 amos high. Now, what was the purpose of this soreg? Why did they have to add it and build it around the koslei Beis Hamikdash? The purpose of the soreg was a siman, it was like a red flag, that Tmei Mesim should realize how close they are to the koslei Beis Hamikdash. Now, keep in mind that a Tamei Mes is allowed to go on the Harabayis, which is called the Machna Leviyah, but he's enjoined from entering into the Machna Shechina. So already 10 amos before he gets into the Machna Shechina, the soreg was like his red bell. You should know you're getting very close. Not only that, the Rabbanon made a takana that the Tomei Mesh should not enter into that area beyond the Sorek, even though on a Doraisa level he's permitted, he hasn't yet entered into the Machnas Shechina until he goes beyond the Kosle Beis Hamikdash, but nevertheless, he is enjoined midrabanan from entering into that area called the Sorek. Now, there's another purpose in the Soreg, and this is an insight into the Mishnayos in Midos of the Tosus Yontif, and that is that they wanted to keep the Goyim out. So this area of the Soreg is Kedei Lahavdil, to separate the Goyim. When the Goyim wanted to come and daven into the Beis HaMikdash, they could only go up to the Soreg. And the Israelim would go all the way up to the Beis HaMikdash. This is the insight of the Tosus Yontif, one of the great Ashkenazic commentaries on the Mishnayos. And at this point, we're going to learn another commentary on the Mishnayos called the Tiferes Yisrael, also one of the great, outstanding commentaries on the Mishnayos. And he claims that during the period of the Yevonim, and Chazal say that Partzu ben Pirtzos, that the Yevonim penetrated 13 Pirtzos when they went into the Beis HaMikdash. Asher gavru Yisrael aleim chazru v'gadru osam shuv. And when they pushed out the Tumah of the Yevonim from all these Pirtzos, so they set up this gader, this fence, around the Kosli Beis HaMikdash, by 10 amos distance, in order to keep out these adversaries, these goyim that were antithetical to Klal Yisrael. Hasore goya pasuach mul kol shar mishari HaMikdash. There were many different gates, as you know, to the Beis HaMikdash, to the gates of the Shari or the Kosle Beis HaMikdash, and every time there was a gate in the Kosle Beis HaMikdash, then you can count 10 amos, and you'll get to an opening in the Soreh. And this also is apparently an insight of the Tosus of the Tiferes Yisrael. Now, from the Soreg, we get to the Chel. Okay, he says, Min Soreg ad Kosle HaZora hoya eser amos. So now we've entered into the Kosle Beis HaMikdash. So we've passed the Soreg, that 10 amos. And once we cross into the Koslim, the Ksolim of the Beis HaMikdash, we have another 10 amos until we reach the walls around the Azara. So you've got the Har Bayis with its very significant distance, and now you have the Soreg with its 10 amos. Now you enter into the area called the Chel, which is going to give you a 10 amos area until you reach the Kosle HaZora. He says, "Hachel lo hayu kulo karka yishara el arba amos umeno hayu karka yisharu sheish amos hanosaros hayu madregos shayu olim mihar bayis l'shara mizrach." According to one opinion, he says that the ground floor of the Chel was on a slope, and although 4 amos were flat, were straight, 6 amos were really kind of steps that would take you up from the Har Bayis all the way to what's called Shar HaMizrach. Again, we haven't gotten to a discussion here about the Shar HaMizrach. And he says that according to one opinion, that's the Tosfos Yontif, these madrigos, these steps, as we said, were only found and only structured corresponding or parallel to the Shar HaMizrach. Now, again, the Shar HaMizrach, we're not ready for this yet, but is one of the Sha'arim of the Ezras Nashim. So I'm just going to fast forward for one split second, then we'll come back to where we're holding, because this is all according to Tosfos Yontif. Shar le'ezras Nashim on the next page is Darko Nichnasim Me'achel le'ezras Nashim. Okay? And this is all on the eastern side of the Beis HaMikdash. Ulam, however, L'das Tiferes Yisrael, Hayumadregos Eliorech Kol Hachel Saviv. So the Chel surrounded the Shar HaZorah, and there were madrigos all around, on all sides. Not the way the Tosfos Yontif thought, that it was only mul, the Shar HaMizrachi of the Ezras Nashim. Now, what does the word chel mean in this context? We said that the word soreg means the weaving of those, planks of wood, the small, thin wood that creates that mechitza. But what does chel mean? Chel is a choma, and why do you use the word chel when you want to indicate that it's a low wall? And hoisa choma nemucha b'merchak eser amos me'azara. So far we don't know the height, the exact height of the chel, but he says that the distance between the chel and the azor was 10 amos, as we mentioned earlier. Mikeva Sharbais Hayim Meshupa. The whole area of the Temple Mount was actually sloped. Is hoisa karka michoma zu ulifnim begova rosh hachoma b'chol samokum nikra nireka ovi osa choma lefichach af b'mokum zeh ad kosal azora kori b'shem chel. So again, due to the fact that the Har Bayis is sloped, the karka from this choma until you get into the top of the choma, it looks like a significant area. And even though it is sloped, so that, if I understand correctly, the karka from that high point, going inside till you get to the head, the top of this choma, is nireka ovi osa choma. It looks about the same thickness as the wall itself, and it's called a chel. Now, we don't know exactly what the height of the chel is of this, this kosel around the Azorah, but it would make sense that if the Har Bayis is Meshupa and the distance between the chel and the Azorah is 10 amos, it would make sense that the height of this kosel called the chel should be a minimum of 10 amos. You follow what I mean? Because if your area from here to here, point X to point Y, is 10 amos distance, and there's a slope, so you want to have a wall that comes with a minimum of 10 amos. And then we get to the Shar le'ezras Nashim. As we said before, the shita of the Tosfos Yontif is that those madrigos on the 6 amos of the chel, that led you to the Azara, led you to the Shar HaMizrach. Okay, then? So again, the Chel is now leading you up to the Shar HaMizrach. And that is called the Shar of the Ezras Noshim. Shar Shedarko Nichnosim Me'achel Li Ezras Noshim. Right, so we say that there's a wall around the Azara. The Azara itself is made up of different parts. The outer part, which has less severity in terms of its kedusha, is called the Ezras Noshim. We'll see why it's called the Ezras Noshim later. And the Ezras Noshim is located on the eastern side of the Beis HaMikdash. I have a little bit of a diagram here. Let's see. Not this one. Oh, this one. Well, let me just see. I should do a screen sharing, but right now, this is the best I can do. So if you take a look, you see where my hand is? This is actually my right hand. You may see it on your left. I don't know. But that's the Mizrach. That's the Mizrach. Okay? So the Beis HaMikdash doesn't go north-south. It goes east-west. Right? So if you're going from the east to the entry into the Kodesh, you would be going from east to west. And this whole area here, you see this very large area, that's called the Ezras Noshim. So that's the first area beyond the walls of the Azor. So you enter into the Shar HaMizrach because you're going into the Ezras Noshim from the east, because the Ezras Noshim is on the east of the Beis HaMikdash. And we'll see about the size of it. It was quite, quite a substantial size relative to the Beis HaMikdash. And the Shar that leads you to the Ezras Noshim from the Chel, right? Because the Chel, we said, was a distance of 10 amos to the entrance into the Azor. The entrance to the Azor is called the Shar HaMizrachi of the Ezras Noshim. So you go from the Chel into the Ezras Noshim through the Shar, and he tells you where that Shar is located. And if you take a look at the diagram, it just says Shar Ezras Noshim, which it sounds like it's just right in the middle here, but I don't know if that's accurate. But he tells you exactly where the Shar Ezras Noshim is. And this goes back to our discussion about the Harabayis. And if you remember that you could enter into the Harabayis through various Sha'arim. One of them was called the Shar Shushan, and that was on the eastern side of the Harabayis. That's where we said the Kohen HaSorif Zapor went out through that Shar. And this Shar called Ezras Noshim, the Shar Li Ezras Noshim, is mul. It corresponds on a direct line to the Shar of Shoshan, which is on the Mizrach of the Harabayis. So if you enter into the Harabayis from the east and you go through the Shar Shoshan, which they didn't do actually, because that was only for the Kohen HaSorif Zapora to exit through the Shar Shoshan. But nevertheless, if you would take a beeline from the Shar Shoshan, you would end up right there standing in front of the Shar HaZorah, which again is the Shar Ezras Noshim. And it's also parallel to the Shar Nicanor. Now, we didn't get to Shar Nicanor yet because we were talking about the Sharim of the Harabayis. Shar Nicanor is already the Shar into the Azorah. So we find here something very interesting because on the one hand, we said that the Chel leads to the Shar Ezras Noshim, which corresponds in a beeline to the Shar Shoshan, Shushan, but it also is parallel to the Shar Nicanor. So if I go back to my diagram, again, we don't know exactly what the distance is, but you go into the Shar Ezras Noshim, and you keep going and going and going towards the west because you entered in from the east. Then ultimately you will reach the Shar Nicanor, which is the Shar that leads you into the Azor, otherwise known as the Ezras Yisrael, because we'll see there's an area that separates the Ezras Yisrael from the Ezras Kohanim. But as far as we're concerned, you enter into the Ezras Yisrael through the Shar Nicanor, and if you come into the Shar Ezras Noshim and you take a straight line without turning to your left or to your right, you will eventually climb the steps to the Shar Nicanor, which leads you into the Ezras Yisrael, the real bona fide Azor. Now let's just say a few words about the Ezras Noshim on the eastern side of the Beis Hamikdash. Its length was 130 amma, and width was 135. So it's 135 amma square. Means it takes up almost a third, or let's say a quarter, almost a quarter of the Har Bayis is the Ezras Noshim. The Arba Lishkos Hayuba. There were 4 Lishkos in the Ezras Noshim. And each of those Lishkos was 40 by 40 amma. Not sure exactly how this mathematics works out because, I don't know, the 4 times 4 is 160. 40, I don't know how you get to 135. Okay, there's something missing there. Anyway, in this Hazara, the women could go in, even Shalom B'Shas Avoda, and you're already in the Hazara. What does that mean? You're already in the Machna Leviyah. So Tommy Mess is not allowed to enter into the Ezras Noshim. I'm sorry, I made a mistake. I was talking about a Tommy Mess. If you have a Zav and a Zava, or what else, a Balkari perhaps, then you're not allowed to enter into the Ezras Noshim because they're excluded from the Machna Leviyah, but a Tommy Mess is only excluded from Machna Shechina. Hence, he's allowed to enter into the Ezras Noshim. Then he says that a Bezdin, at some point, it's a Bezdin Yoshafat, they made a Gzera that even at full Yom is excluded from the Ezras Noshim. So I don't understand why the Gzera was only with regard to a Tful Yom. He doesn't tell you exactly why. Now, a Tful Yom apparently is only excluded from the Machna Shechina. And this Ezras Noshim has the din of Machna Leviyah. So just like a Tommy Mess is allowed to enter into the Ezras Noshim on a Doraisa level, so to a Tful Yom would apparently be allowed Midoraisa to enter into the Ezras Noshim. But Yoshafat and his Bezdin made a Gzera that a Tful Yom should not enter into the Ezras Noshim. But for now, we'll have to accept that on face value. I mean, obviously, this requires, you have to know a lot more about Shiluach Machnos and about the status of a Tful Yom and why at some point in history they made this Gzera not allowing a Tful Yom into the Ezras Noshim. Apparently, he's allowed to go up until the Machne Shechina, but they made a Gzera, and why this Gzera only applies to a Tvul Yom. Okay, man? So this is where we'll stop for today.